Good evening, Commissioners and Budget Committee members. We'll just give it just a moment as we have 5 people, but we can start with the opening remarks from you, Miss Angie.
Okay, so I will just welcome those that are in attendance. At this point from the Budget Committee, we are going to start with the budget message once again, so that members of our public have the opportunity to hear that during the public hearing process. As you were joining, there were some words exchanged. Just thank you for serving on the Budget Committee this year. To each of you, your service is incredibly important in this process. I would like to turn it over to our interpreters, specifically Victor, to walk through brief instructions in Spanish for anyone wishing to hear real-time interpretation of tonight's meeting. In addition, we do have ASL services available. So Victor.
Thank you. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos. Hoy tenemos inglés y español para esta reunión. Si está ingresando por medio de una computadora de escritorio o portátil, por favor haga clic en el icono de globo en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla de su computadora, o si está utilizando la aplicación de Zoom a través de un dispositivo móvil como un teléfono o tableta, presione los 3 puntos con la leyenda más en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla o en la parte superior derecha de su pantalla, y así de esa manera podrá seleccionar su idioma preferido. Si desea escuchar la reunión en inglés, seleccione inglés, o si prefiere español, seleccione español. Y si tiene alguna pregunta o alguna duda, por favor notifíquenos para que así de esa forma le podamos ayudar. Welcome, everyone. We have this meeting available in English and Spanish, so please take a moment to select your language of preference. If you're joining us through a desktop computer or a laptop, there will be a globe icon at the bottom of your screen with the legend interpretation. Click there and you can select your language. And if you're using a smartphone or a tablet, there will be 3 dots with the legend more at the bottom right or upper right hand side of your computer screen. That way you will be able to select the language of preference. So if you prefer to hear the meeting in English, select English, or if you prefer Spanish, select Spanish. If you have any questions, please let us know and we will do our best to help you. If we can go, thank you. También tenemos las diapositivas en español. Así que tome un momento para ir al sitio web www.co.washington.or.us. Ese es el sitio web del condado de Washington y va a encontrar la opción para descargar las diapositivas en español y seguir la reunión con español. Also, we have the slides available in Spanish, so please take a moment to go to the county's website, www.co.washington.or.us, and you can follow along the presentation with the slides in Spanish. Thank you and welcome.
Next slide, please. And I do want to thank all of our interpreters and their commitment to this process and other engagement processes we have at Washington County. Just this morning, I learned from staff that we have received community feedback of appreciation for interpretation services, as well as translated documents on the county's website. So this is an important step to provide access and inclusion within our budget process. And I wanted to share that information with your budget committee. Next slide. As I provide the budget message this year, I first need to acknowledge the strained times we are all in. Both our community and our organization are facing challenges, the likes of which we have not seen in generations. Pandemic, recession, housing crisis, and others. As an organization, we have an opportunity now to learn everything we can from our experiences and to rethink our approach going forward. Part of that learning is the act of listening. This year, with the board's leadership, we have hosted 2 virtual town hall meetings focused on how we approach and prioritize the budget. In December, there were 227 participants. March, 85 participants. We are also supporting more opportunities for community input, as the Budget Committee has seen as part of our agenda this year. Another aspect of the board's leadership was put in motion with the adoption of the equity resolution in February 2020. It is reflected in an equity conscious approach the organization is taking with this budget year. This is the inaugural year of the use of our budget equity tool, the process we have borrowed from the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. Our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer and her team in the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement have done tremendous work with each department and office in the organization to launch the equity tool this year. With that being said, the context for preparing the proposed budget this year has been enormously challenging for a number of reasons, due to both issues unique to our current situation and long building structural problems. Although the budget I am proposing to the committee is a balanced budget as required by law, the path forward will require that we address both current and ongoing factors shaping the county's budgeting environment. Our intent is to work with the board to reset the county's approach to achieve financial sustainability in the next fiscal year and over the long term. Next slide, please. Just to provide a bit more detail about what I mean, here's a summary of our approach to pulling together a balanced proposed budget this year. I will speak to both the short-term and structural issues as we go. Constrained property tax system. In our region, Washington County is uniquely disadvantaged with Oregon's property tax structure put in place in the 1990s. This is a long-term structural issue. And despite having the second largest and fastest growing population in the region, Washington County continues to struggle to meet community need with property tax revenue derived from the lowest permanent property tax rate. We have a reliance on local option levies. As a result, Washington County and other local governments serving growing communities are now relying on local option levies more than ever to support ongoing operations. At the district level, we are grateful for voters in the urban unincorporated area for their passage of the enhanced Sheriff's Patrol District as part of the primary election in May. Use of one-time funding. These one-time revenues from the federal government have been critical to the county's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. But over-reliance on one-time revenue has an effect of masking structural problems in the county's financial approach. Next slide, please. On the expenditure side, I am not going to go into the same level of detail as I did when we presented this list in earlier meetings, but staff and I are happy to answer questions that your budget committee may have as we go through tonight's presentation and discussion. Implementation of the budget equity tool. In the first year of implementing the tool, the proposed budget establishes baseline data and allows us to identify data gaps to focus on addressing over time. Fund essential community service levels. As we sought to balance the proposed budget, our goal has been to preserve the existing personnel needed to cover these essential core services. We are also limiting the expansion of new service capacity. Continue general fund transfers. Past boards of county commissioners have chosen to transfer funds consistent to the Washington County Cooperative Library Services and the Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program. The proposed budget continues this practice. This fiscal year, these transfers amount to 17% of the general fund expenditures, thereby continuing these investments levels as historically determined. Navigating increasing inflation, supply chain problems, wage increases, and higher oil prices are all contributing to an inflationary environment for the next year's county budget and more than likely beyond. The proposed budget assumes an even-handed approach to cost of living adjustments, a 4.5% increase for both represented and non-represented employees. This is also aimed at retaining our vital workforce. Minimize capital spending. Next year's budget anticipates limited general fund spending on capital projects, materials, and services, or other investments that can be postponed without affecting the health or safety of county employees and the public. Within this context, the county will need to explore strategic investments in its technology systems as it modernizes. This includes the starting of our enterprise resource management system replacement, also known with an acronym ERP. Navigating federal and state mandates. These mandated programs, as needed as they might be by our community, are contributing to the structural challenges embedded in Washington County's current financial model for supporting community-focused services. A list of these unfunded mandates is provided, new unfunded mandates is provided in the budget message in the proposed budget summary. Funding board priorities. Finally, our board has identified priorities to invest in over the short and long term. I've already mentioned some of these priorities, such as helping the community to recover from the pandemic and continuing with the county's equity work. Other priorities are listed in the budget message at the beginning of the proposed budget summary. Given both the immediate and structural problems affecting the county at this moment, the proposed budget seeks to implement these priorities as much as possible within the limited resources available. I'll note that the process of revising the organization's community strategic plan in the next few years will provide an important venue for addressing some of the long-term structural challenges with our financial mode. And with that, I'll hand the presentation over to our interim Chief Financial Officer, Rodney Rhodes.
Thank you, Ms. Angie. I greatly appreciate that. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chair Boland to call the meeting to order and then ask Clerk Moss to do a roll call.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We're here today to discuss the budget and hopefully pass it, and I call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Chair Boland. Joe Ross, are you with us?
I am, yes, thank you.
Welcome. Paul Lathrop, are you with us, Paul?
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Fye?
I'm here.
Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
Commissioner Treese?
Here.
Commissioner Willie?
Here.
Chair Harrington?
Here.
And Chair Boland.
Here.
We have an 8 for you, Madam Chair Boland.
And what about Cesar?
He is currently not online, and I believe staff has not heard from him.
Okay, so he's not joining us later. Okay, got it.
Chair
So
Boland,
yes, ma'am.
before we start, I would like to make an introduction of our new Chief Financial Officer, Greg Munn. So if you don't mind, if I take a few moments,
Of
thank
course.
you. Clerk Moss, can you promote Mr. Munn? And I see he's joining right now. Greg, are you able to turn your camera on and unmute?
Almost.
Okay, this is day 2. So we all know the challenges of getting our technology working. So Chair Bolin and Budget Committee, I wanted to take just a brief moment to introduce our new Chief Financial Officer, Greg Munn. Greg joins us from Deschutes County, where he recently served as the CFO and treasurer. And prior to that has extensive background in finance positions within school systems as well as counties. And so Greg just provides a rich experience of financial planning, sustainability planning, and budgeting. So we welcome Greg, and I also want to take an opportunity to extend heartfelt, grateful appreciation for our interim Chief Financial Officer, Rodney Rhodes, who has been with us for 8 months. He mentioned that today, and it actually feels like yesterday. He just came, so we're in warp speed time, and he has just been integral as well as with our budget team in this budget process. So just wanted to make that introduction for your Budget Committee, Chair Bolin. I appreciate you letting me take a few moments.
Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So next on our agenda.
Thank you, Chair Bolin. This evening, we will go over the county's budget. We'll do a summary of what was discussed during the budget committee meetings, as well as the SDL #1 budget overview. We will take committee questions and discussion. We do have a hard stop at 6 p.m. For public and community organization testimony. And I'll be looking to Clerk Moss to hold me accountable for that. And then finally, the budget committee action prior to adjournment. If I could, I would like to express, as I did this morning, to the board and to this budget committee, my deepest thanks for this opportunity to serve as your interim Chief Financial Officer. And I will tell you that it has been a great honor to serve Washington County. You've got a wonderful community, wonderful organization, and I wish nothing but the best for you in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so the county budget presentation. Go ahead. As we talked about during the budget committee meetings that took place earlier, total revenues and expenditures equal $1.6 billion budget. That is a 4% increase over the fiscal 22 budget. The left-hand side shows the revenues and the percentage of breakdown for the revenues, as well as the right hand showing the expenditures. And you'll notice personnel and materials and services make up the bulk of those expenditures. Next slide. Total by functional area. As I mentioned earlier on, again, we do break down by functional area the expenditures. Public safety and justice, housing, health and human services, and then the non-operating make up a large percentage of the total 1.6, as well as our capital outlay. Again, just to reiterate, the 1.6 does reflect things such as debt service, insurance fund, those types of funds that do not have direct personnel costs involved. Next slide, please. General fund revenues, $320 million in revenues, $355 million in expenditures. The difference between those expenditures and revenues are the things such as fund balance, contingency, that are not included as a part of the appropriations, the total appropriations, but we do include those for the purposes of this slide. Next slide, please. This will give you the functional area breakdown, again, the non-operating being things like I lost my train of thought, I apologize. The non-personnel related expenditures, general government makes up a 23% percentage, public safety and justice remainder. And we'll talk more about that as we go into the presentation this evening. Next slide. Administrative Policy 405 sets the fund balance targets for the general fund. Each year we go through a process where we look at the general fund on a 5-year snapshot. And we do it for the purposes of maintaining our general fund balances with a minimum of 15% and a maximum slightly to just above the minimum. And then we begin to rebound and project slightly under the 20% threshold for 27-28. Next slide. At this point, we will begin, I believe, the SDL number 1 presentation material. Next slide. I will turn it over to Stephen Roberts, I believe, will take over from here.
For tonight, it'll be Stacia Sheeler and Sheila Giabroni. So
Thank you,
Stacia.
Clark. Thank you.
Good evening. Has Stacia joined us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good, thank you. So good evening, I'm Sheila Giambroni, the Senior Administrative Services Manager with Land Use and Transportation. And with me this evening is Stacia Sheeler, our SDL Coordinator. We are pleased to provide a quick recap of the district for you this evening. The service district for lighting, number 1, SDL, as identified by the area in orange on the map, is a special service district that provides street lighting service for areas of Washington County outside of cities. It funds nearly 13,000 streetlights, benefiting over 47,000 properties. Street lighting is required for new developments and can be provided in existing neighborhoods with majority support from benefited property owners. SDL charges are assessed and collected through the annual property tax bill for all properties located within the SDL assessment area. Next, I'll turn it over to Stacia to provide a summary of the budget request for fiscal year 22-23.
Good evening. The SDL budget proposal for fiscal year 22-23 remains consistent with previous budget years. We do see some increase in revenues due to the addition of new tax lots in the district. Materials and services account for the 66% of expenditures, primarily in utility costs for the streetlights. Additional costs include staff charges to support the district's portion of county-wide and road fund indirect costs, as well as investment in information technology services, as the district will receive a database software update to manage our street lighting assets and rate setting processes. The district maintains a fund balance contingency to cover 4.5 months of expenditures until property tax payments start arriving in assessment and taxation. Any questions?
That concludes our presentation for this evening.
Thank you very much. Recordings of the May 9th and May 12th meetings are available on our webpage. The 2022-2023 County Budget Reports webpage will contain the recordings of the 2 nights that we held on May 9th and May 12th for those that would like to go back and review. Next slide, please. At this point, Chair Boland, I'll turn it back over to you for Budget Committee questions and discussions.
Okay, so having the presentation. So we're just discussing the special lighting district number 1 right now, correct?
We actually can discuss either or. I'll get into a little bit more detail on the functional area expenditures later on in the presentation, but it is at the pleasure of the committee.
Okay. So committee members, you have first opportunity to ask any questions. So are there any questions that you'd like to bring up at this time? Hearing none. Do we have anything, Clerk Moss, from our is it the public? Not yet. Not till 6.
Yep.
Okay.
4 more minutes, Chair Bolin.
Okay. So if we don't have any questions and we have a 4-minute thing until 6, is there something else we can do for 4 minutes?
Clerk Moss can speak very slowly.
Well, I just like to extend my thanks to Administrator Angie and to Chair Harrington and the board for allowing me to help facilitate this for the Budget Committee, and my thanks to the finance staff. So Commissioner Rogers?
I would add for those who are viewing, as well as the chair who already knows, that this isn't our first attempt to go through this. Obviously, you're not hearing a lot of questions and comments because those were done at a previous meeting. So you never know who's listening on any particular evening, and they might be tuning in saying, it's a little strange that nobody has any questions on anything. Well, I can assure you those questions were asked in meetings prior to this one. So that's just a little bit of clarification to the viewing public.
Yes, and I will add that the finance team did a good job of putting a question and answer page on the county budget webpage to address the questions from the previous budget meetings that the public is welcome to take a look at to see those questions and answers in advance of the budget adoption on June 21st.
If I could just take a few minutes or a second, I won't take 3 minutes, but I want to take another opportunity. I said early on during this process how much I greatly appreciate the staff participation. In particular, I want to give a shout out to Judy Lynn and Michael Clark, who are our interim budget managers. They are the heart and soul behind getting this where we are today. Certainly have kept the wheels on the bus, as I've said a number of times, but also the rest of the budget team and the finance staff for all their hard work. And then also to the administration folks, the county administration office, and all of the players there that have spent a number of hours going through this process. And it's been as I said before, a pleasure and an honor to serve and to spend time and get to know all these folks. So thank you very much for all the work that's been done by staff.
Great.
I would just like to note that we don't have to ask Rodney to speak slowly. He is from Texas, so he does that normally. Thank you.
I have been told that I can speak rather quickly, so, but thank you, sir.
All right. With that, members of the public, we have now reached our certain time of 6 p.m. for public comment. So we have allowed each member of the public up to 2 minutes to provide public testimony on the county's main budget, and also up to 5 minutes for recognized community planning organizations. We have one person signed up, so I'll let them go first, and then we'll look for any additional hands. So we have Melissa Laird first. Melissa, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Great. Hi. So greetings, commissioners and budget committee members. This is a follow-up from my question that I posed in the May meeting. So Washington County residents want to be safe. We have spoken by passing the ESPD levy with overwhelming support and re-electing the DA Kevin Barton. We want all members of our very diverse community to feel safe in our homes, in our cities, and at school. We don't want Portland crime to spread into our county. We do want to follow the rule of law, hold criminals accountable, and protect victims. We want to continue to be Oregon's safest major urban county when it comes to person and property crimes. And we want the continual learning and adaptive services from our sheriff's office when it comes to dealing with mental illness, homelessness, and cultural differences. We want law enforcement to work with our schools to provide a safe and secure place for our students to learn. The $30 million deficit in the general fund is alarming. Putting a freeze on all vacant general fund positions and denying new requests has an inequitable impact on the sheriff's office. The 1.08 officers per 1,000 residents has been our minimum targeted goal for community safety, and this budget puts us below that minimum target. The jail has been fully reopened since early April, and chronic understaffing continues to increase the risk to both inmate and deputy safety. I understand that there is a position control work group, a multidisciplinary group that has been tasked to continue to work through the staffing issues, and I thank you for that. You see the seriousness of those positions being frozen or cut. And I just want to remind you all that a budget is just that. It's a budget. It is a living plan that can and should change as needed. When a great deputy hire is identified for a frozen or cut position, I am hopeful that the multidisciplinary group and our new CFO, Greg Mund, will find a way to hire that person and allow the county to continue to provide one of its most important, if not the most important service, which is to keep Washington County safe. We are the safest large county in Oregon. Let's keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. If any other members on our attendee list would like to provide public comment, please do so by utilizing the raise hand function and I will call on you. Not seeing any additional hands, Chair Bolin.
Okay, so we close our public testimony time and we move on to the next part of our presentation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, moving on. Oops.
Chair Bolin, I do see Budget Committee Member Harrington's hand up.
Okay. Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Chair Bolin. I'm wondering if we might have County Administrator Angie or Mr. Rhodes speak to this misunderstanding that some have that we have a budget deficit at this time.
Yes, I'm happy to. And Mr. Rhodes, if you would like to add on to my comments, please do so. So it is my responsibility as your county administrator and budget officer to present to the budget committee and ultimately the Board of Commissioners for final adoption a balanced budget. It is very customary within public sector local government that staff do have to balance the budget because we have many needs that our community is depending on. Part of my responsibility is also to ensure transparency with the community of the challenges that we have within the budget. Your proposed budget message does clearly outline with transparency those proposed challenges that I am fully confident with the board's leadership, input from the community, as well as our dedicated staff, that we will navigate through these challenges with financial sustainability. Part of this process, part of the budget process this year that I spoke to earlier this evening was including community engagement. It is also about being transparent with our resources we have, in fact, challenges that we have and how we're going to allocate those resources. So while we did have, from a staff perspective, challenges in balancing this year's budget, we did so with openness and transparency, both across our organization, with your budget committee, the Board of Commissioners, and ultimately our community at large. And so, Mr. Rhodes, do you have anything to add to that?
I think you hit all the points perfectly. Thank you.
Well, if I could also boil it down, Ms. Angie, do we have a balanced budget or do we have a deficit to solve?
We have a balanced budget. We have a balanced proposed budget. That's what I want to be clear on the process. That's still a proposed.
Commissioner Rogers?
Just to be clear, what the chair is bringing up is correct. In the Oregon law, you have to have a balanced budget. But Tanya, why don't you say how much money you felt you had to remove from the budget because of lack of resources to fund desired expenditures?
$30 million. And we did so through multiple ways. We did use one-time funding and also really, I will say, not approve certain needs of the departments. The budget guidance given to departments was a flat budget year, flat budget request. The challenge we had, though, is we had inflationary costs that are really out of control of staff. We did have, as I mentioned before, in the proposed budget is a 4.5% cost of living adjustment for staff to retain our talented workforce in this really challenging hiring environment. Ms. Laird had spoke to specifically our sheriff's office. That's across the board of challenge of retention and recruitment and the timeline of recruiting staff, COVID pandemic response, and ensuring that we fiscally responsibly manage those one-time funds moving forward. We did implement a hiring freeze. Part of that is to preserve our existing workforce because they are, from my perspective, one of our most important assets. And it is far more costly to hire than it is retain our current quality workforce that we have. So there were multiple kind of levers and issues occurring. I do want to touch on unfunded state mandates because of the role that counties play and the services that counties deliver. We actually are I'm going to use the word beneficiaries of unfunded mandates many times. Within the budget message, you will see reference to the impact that our DA's office felt this year. For example, our DA's office, I believe, and I'm looking to staff to correct me if I'm wrong, had actually requested 15 FTE to not only meet the state mandate changes relative to discovery, but multiple policing agencies throughout Washington County implementing body-worn cameras, and the impact that that sheer volume of new technology evidence has on our DA's office. Within your proposed budget, there's 3 FTE to meet that need. So we're having challenges meeting just the unfunded mandates, and our population is increasing. A chart that I refer to frequently in conversations is our permanent property tax rate. We have the lowest permanent property tax rate of the 3 metro counties, and our population has grown much faster than those other 2 counties, which has put a compounding effect on our budget over time. And that's the structural issues that previous county administrator Bob Davis has spoke to, as well as the interim county administrator Stephen Rhodes. So that's a brief summary. I would encourage members of the viewing public to read the budget message because it does outline all those factors and others. And Commissioner Rogers, I still see your hand is up.
Yeah, the reason I wanted you to go through that exercise is that you have done a good job of balancing a lot of demands. And I know that our chair at our board and our board is fully aware of the challenges you're facing. for those, again, for the viewing audience, this all looks like it's a lot of levers that are being pulled and the hydraulics are that we're balancing. And, but it's much more complex than that in terms of your dollars. And I think your opening statement, you said it well, so I'm not going to drone on that, but I just thought it deserves some attention and some accolades to you and your staff for taking a very, very difficult situation that's going to be exacerbated, in my opinion, in future years because of inflationary costs, which you mentioned. So that's the only reason I brought that forward.
Yeah. Commissioner Welly?
Yes, and I would just want to echo Roy's comments and say, Tanya, you did a great job of on the fly recapping that. It's hard to extract that, quite frankly, from the budget message because it's a multi-page document. So I'm glad that you did that. I think it's also important that we be able to communicate that there's a differentiation between ARPA money that we have received as a county, shelter housing money that we've received as a county, and affordable housing from a couple of years ago. All of that multi-millions is designated, and we can end also one time or over a longer period of time, but certainly the time certain that we cannot be using that money for filling in the gaps in some of the other funding sources that we are short that you pointed out on. So I think it is a myriad of problems, and certainly, as you've identified, a very complex problem. So I thought you did a great job of recapping that.
I do want to provide some assurance also to the budget committee and members of the public. We carefully account for different types of funds. Budget committee member Willie, you had referenced supportive housing services, affordable housing. Those are different funds, or also like different checkbooks or different accounts in our own private life. And so staff that are funded through those funding sources are contained within those funds. And in essence, we can't mingle the checkbooks or accounts. And within your proposed budget clearly delineates the ARPA funds being within what's called Fund 155 to ensure that those staff, those costs are budgeted for and accounted for in a limited duration pattern, because the ARPA funds are to be committed by the end of 2024, December 31st, 2024. Although we have through 2026 to spend them, we do have to have the commitments by the end of that 2024. So I do want to provide some assurance to the budget committee relative to our financial accounting. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Bowen.
Okay, so we've had our public testimony, we've had our additional comments. What's our next agenda item?
We were scheduled to take an intermission, but with the committee's approval, we'll just go right into the functional area analysis and get to the adoption process, if that's okay with the chair and the committee members.
So we're moving forward with the rest of the budget presentation, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let's do that.
All right, thank you. So right now what we'll do is we will continue. I'll give a brief overview of the functional areas. We'll start with the general government and we'll run through. And then if there are any questions, we'll take those at the end of our functional area presentation, if that's okay.
Sure.
Next slide.
Yep.
So the general government functional area is, just as a frame of reference, it's on page 55 of your budget summary. You can see that the support services and the COVID-19 response makes up the bulk of that. We do have a slight reduction in the support services area. That's a result of us not budgeting tranche 2 ARPA funding as a part of this proposed budget. Our plan is to continue to work with staff internally to develop some recommendations for the tranche 2 funding, and then bring that and do it as a budget adjustment once that process has taken place. Next slide. Under public safety and justice, you can see, and I won't go through all of the various pieces of the pie, so to speak, but this will give you an idea of the expenditures, the sheriff's office being the bulk of those expenditures. Next slide. Land use and transportation, again, you see here where the road fund consumes the bulk of the land use and transportation expenditures, along with things like long-range planning and things of that nature for land use and transportation. Next slide. Under health and human services, housing, behavioral health, public health make up the bulk of the expenditures for the health and human services functional area. Next slide. Education, culture, and recreation. Our library fund, this is the transfer that takes place from the general fund to our library activities. That makes up the bulk of the $71 million that you see here for this particular functional area. Next slide. Non-departmental, as I mentioned earlier, this is where we have our contingency funding and our things like community network and non-departmental expenditures. This is a non-personnel related functional area. Next slide. Facilities and technologies, facilities and parks make up the bulk of this particular functional area. And I'll note in this particular area where you see a number of negatives in the change column compared to 2022. This is a result of a lot of the projects that were going on within this particular functional area being completed. And so consequently, you're seeing a reduction in the expenditures. Next slide. Transportation capital funding. This is where the MISTIP funding comes into play. We do have as you know, a pay-as-you-go system that transfers dollars from the general fund to the MISTIP fund for construction projects throughout the county. And these make up the bulk of those dollars. We have contracts that are in the process of being let to award the majority of these dollars as we go forward. And we anticipate that those will be awarded shortly. Next slide. Non-operating, again, these are the debt, things like debt service, insurance, replacement and reserve accounts. These are non-personnel related expenditures that we utilize to pay for these particular services as we go throughout the year. Next slide. And just a recap of the budget. The total budget, $1.6 billion. This will give you the breakdown by functional area of where all the expenditures are occurring, and will provide you with additional detail. I will note that as I went through these slides, I did not necessarily refer to, and I apologize, the page numbers within the budget summary. But all of these detail for each functional area is contained within the budget summary. And if you would like, we'll be happy to provide you with those page numbers as a reference point if need be. Next slide. So at this time, unless there are no more discussions or questions, we will turn it back over to you, Chair Boland, for the motion and to approve, if it could be read as you see on the screen.
I move that we approve the Washington County fiscal year 2022-23 budget as proposed, that we level the following taxes. Washington County's permanent tax rate of $2.2484 per $1,000 of assessed value, a public levy local option levy tax rate of 0.47 cents per 1,000 of assessed value, the library local option levy tax rate of 0.22 cents per 1,000 of assessed value, and a general obligation bond amount of $5,204,291. Would there be a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Who seconded? Pam? Pam Treese seconded. So seconded by Pam Treese. Are we ready for voting? Or are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion to approve as stated, please raise their hand. All those opposed, same sign. It looks like we have approved our budget as explained in those details.
Yes.
Do we need to call on Paul Lathrop verbally by any chance? I didn't see his little hand raise come up either way, so I thought I'd ask.
I raised my hand. Thank you.
All right, so the motion passes, Chair Boland, 9-0.
Great. Good work to everyone. Is there any other business we need to do today related to the budget? Mr. Rowe.
Clerk Moss, the SDL budget.
Okay. So I move that we approve the service district for lighting number 1 fiscal year 2022-23 budget as proposed. Is there a second to the motion?
I second it.
And that was Nafisi.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Fye, seconds. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the motion as presented, please raise their hand. Hands down. Everyone opposed, please raise your hand. It looks like we are complete.
Yes, the motion passes 9-0.
9-0. Excellent. So next on our agenda is the county commissioners have a public meeting on June 21st and will accept additional public testimony before they formally adopt the budget as proposed and approved by this budget committee. So will that be a Zoom meeting or will that be an in-person meeting?
That will be a Zoom meeting.
Okay. So I invite members of the public that would like to make additional testimony. Please read through the Washington County website. They're doing a really good job of updating all the material there. So if you can read up before you come to the meeting, a lot of your questions may already have been answered and you just have to find it in the materials. But I know people will help you with the question if you want to call. So with that, other than adjournment, I guess I do want to extend my thanks to the staff and all the people that make this process so easy. And thank my fellow committee members that have shown up and participated. And with that, is there anything else for the good of the order?
Thank you, Chair Bolin.
Thank you,
Thank
and
you to
welcome to
all of our
Greg.
community members.
Thank you to Greg for showing up and participating in the beginning.
I'd also like to make a quick comment to Rodney. Thank you. Again, I said that today during our meeting, but I think our entire county board expresses that sentiment, that it's tough to come in when it's a short term, especially when you are facing some very intricate budget details, lots of demands. So as I said, I applaud you for all that and hope that your travels, wherever they may lead you in the years to come, are successful.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I greatly appreciate that. And again, I thank you all for giving me the opportunity. I will miss working with everyone at the county. And I've got until the end of the month, so hopefully we'll make the best of it. So thank you again.
Thank you. So our meeting is adjourned officially at whatever the time is. 6:30. All right. Good night, good evening, and see you all on the 21st.
Thank you so much.